Council can please place their appearances on the record.
Morning, Your Honor. Elliot Blumberg on behalf of Henry Sullivan.
Good morning. Zach Backlund on behalf of the defendant, Alexandria Taylor, who is in the room with me on the Zoom panel.
Thank you. We are here today for a evidentiary hearing in this matter. The parties prepared to proceed?
We are, Judge. I just want to be clear on we only have an hour and a half. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes, we're prepared to go forward.
Okay. Mr. Blumberg, your client is the plaintiff, so we will begin with your case. Any opening statement you'd like to make?
Yes, Judge, just briefly, given the time issue. These young couple together for a significant period of time, had a child together. Mr. Sullivan was very much involved on a daily basis with raising the child until such time as the mother just sort of picked up the child and moved to Bay City. And she has denied basically every request for parenting time since then. It is our hope today that when the court makes its recommendation, you will recommend that the parties share joint physical custody and joint legal custody of the child. The child is not yet school age, so that type of arrangement would be appropriate. That's what we would be asking the court to consider.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I think the proofs will demonstrate the reasons for the parties' separation and the reasons why Ms. Taylor left the home and brought the child with her, and the custodial environment she's exercised with that child for the child's entire life, and how that's continued since the parties' separation. And I know that Ms. Taylor would request that custodial environment remain consistent with her receiving legal and physical custody of the child with supervised parenting time provided to Mr. Sullivan.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Mr. Blumberg, you're first witness.
Yes, Judge, we call Mason Buckingham. Would you come here?
Thank you. All right, Mr. Blumberg, you may proceed.
Thank you. Now, Mason, keep looking straight ahead because that's for the camera.
Okay.
Okay. So, can you tell the court again a little bit about yourself in terms of your background?
Yes, sir. I'm a retired school superintendent and a friend of Judge Cooper. And we offered our services to Judge Cooper, and he assigned us to Gary, to Henry. He thought that he was a young man who would really benefit from our help. And so Gary Waldo and I were both assigned by Judge Cooper to work with Henry. And it's been a very pleasant trip. He's a very astute young man, and he has stuck to his promises. He hasn't had a drink in over a year. He will not allow anybody in his house with alcohol or drugs of any kind. He has, over that period of time, he has taken many blood tests. He's never had a negative blood test. His parole officer has recommended him to us and shortened his term because she says that he is one of her best clients that she's ever had.
Let me just stop you there. How long have you and Mr. Waldo been working with Henry?
Since April of 2023.
Now, Henry is currently involved with the drug court. Is that correct?
Henry is not the drug court. No, he was never involved with the drug court. He's been involved with Judge Cooper's court.
That's one and the same.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Some people call it sobriety court. Some people call it drug court. Okay. The fact is that Henry, you're aware of the fact that Henry's had some criminal records relating to drinking in the past. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware of Henry's involvement in counseling or steps that he's taken to maintain his sobriety?
Yes, Henry has attended 82 or more AA meetings. He still is involved in going to that. He has changed his environment with no longer associating with anybody in or out of his family who has anything to do with alcohol or drugs, as his girlfriend, her father, does. So, yes, your question was...
Okay, I think you've answered it.
Okay.
Now, your interactions with Henry, did that all take place prior to or subsequent to the mother taking his child and moving out of the area?
Prior to, we visited Henry many times at his house when Lexi was there, along with Alice, the baby, and there was a very good relationship between Henry and Alice, the baby. He was very attentive to her, had a very good relationship with her.
Subsequent to the mother's removing the child from Otsego County, were you involved on behalf of Henry to try to get some parenting time for him?
The first thing that happened was that all of a sudden she was gone and taken away, and there was no effort to inform Henry of where she went and who she went with and what was happening. Henry was very concerned that what's happened to my daughter, where is she? Like any father would be if somebody walked in and took his daughter away from him. He would want to know where she's at, what's happening to her, to protect her. So prior to that time, we, what was the question? I got to get back.
What efforts were you involved in trying to get Henry some parenting time?
So I tried to call Lexi because I had her phone number. There was no answer. I was sure that she was at this phone line, but I didn't know where it was. And I wanted to find out if this baby was being properly taken care of. I called and I called and I called, and when the phone would go to leave a message or whatever, I just hang up and call again. And it evidently aggravated Lexi's dad. He got very upset when he finally answered the phone and said, "No, she's fine and she's here with me." And he went off on me badly.
Okay, let me stop you there. To your knowledge, how long has Lexi had the child away from Henry, if you know?
Into 5 months.
And during that time, has Henry been allowed to spend any time with his child?
Absolutely none. There would be an opportunity for him to at least see his daughter on Facebook or with Zoom. That has not been offered. He has not laid eyes on his daughter in all that time.
Now, you heard, perhaps you did or didn't hear, opposing counsel, Lexi's attorney, is suggesting to the court that Henry should have supervised parenting time. Do you have any knowledge as to why supervised parenting time would be required?
Absolutely not. He is very protective of his daughter. There's no need to have anybody else there. One of the problems is that if the supervised person would be her father, who is a constant alcoholic and has been known to fly off the handle, Henry is afraid to be in his supervision anywhere other than a police post.
Okay, and thank you, Judge. Again, given the limited time we have, I have no other questions for this witness. You need to sit there because I think opposing counsel will want to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Buckingham, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. We sort of danced around the subject a little bit of, the involvement and the reasons you became involved with Henry. You mentioned Judge Cooper or the sobriety court or drug court, sort of synonymous titles for it. So why did you become involved with Henry beyond what was the nexus of the judge's decision? Were there drug problems, alcohol problems? What was going on there, to your knowledge?
He was cleaning himself up from having problems, and he needed support, and that's what we provided, is support. He's become involved, seriously involved with our church. He has become baptized in our church. He has a seat at the table with a group of men who meet weekly. He's part of that group. He's done other things with people in the church. He is changing.
Mr. Buckingham, I appreciate the answer. As Mr. Blumberg said, we are a little tight on time and we're going a little bit beyond the call of the question there. So I thank you for the response. You mentioned you've been working with Henry since April of 2023. And And it sounds like there was some overlap between Henry, Lexi, and Alice all living together at the home. Did I understand that correctly?
I think so. We could have been involved a little earlier than that. I don't have that date right in my mind.
Okay. And so you alluded to conversations that you had or you met with everybody. So were you meeting at Lexi and Henry's home where they resided? Where were these meetings taking place?
Gary and I went to his house and met in his house with Lexi and the baby and Henry. It appeared to be a very good family.
Okay.
I have a history with Lexi too. I know Lexi for time before, longer than for Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Buckingham. How long did those meetings typically take place for?
I think we were there for an hour or more.
Okay.
There weren't many days that went by that one of us didn't contact Henry and have contact with him. Did
those conversations always involve Henry and Lexi together, or was it just Henry or just Lexi? What was the?
They were usually Henry and Lexi in the same room with the baby playing on the floor with many toys that she had, and the relationship. You could see the relationship between them, all of them. That was good.
Sorry, Mr. Buckingham, I just want to stop and then move on to my next question. I understand, wanting to answer. We're a little pressed on time. So did you have any one-on-one conversations with Lexi during those visits to the house?
I don't recall of any of those.
Okay. And I believe you alluded to meetings or something. Is that an AA or is it a church group? What were the 82 meetings that you alluded to?
AA groups.
Okay. 82
is the AA group, and Henry can answer those questions better than I can.
Okay. And you mentioned calling Lexi several times. Do you recall how many times you called her?
Well, it was a constant call, one right after another. On that same date, I kept calling the same number because it was the only number I had was her number. And I was hoping to get her. Instead of getting her, I got her.
Okay. And you mentioned during your testimony as well that you aren't aware of any offers back and forth or anything like that, or, presentations Lexi might have made regarding parenting time, correct?
No, I think that Henry has said to us that we being he and Lexi had talked about this in advance and had said both of us are good parents, and Lex and Alice would be fine with either one of them. We agreed that we would share her. We would agree that we would share her equally if we should ever separate.
And perhaps to narrow my question a little bit. So I just want to be clear that, you haven't been made privy to conversations that would have involved offers of parenting time of one nature or the other between the parties, correct?
We had one incident that it was offered that Henry could have spent Sunday afternoon, 4 hours with the baby if we wanted to take it. What would happen was her father would take the baby to West Branch, which would be a medium point, and Henry would be able to, under supervision of her father, who we have no reason not to believe that he wasn't drunk at that time too. And very frankly, Henry was afraid. We denied that. We didn't do that because Henry was not feel safe meeting with her father in a drunken state in a remote location.
Did you have any thoughts about a different potential supervisor who would be available for something like that?
We didn't talk. We didn't talk about that. It wasn't offered. We didn't talk about that at all.
I have no other questions for Mr. Buckingham, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Mr. Blumberg, any additional questions?
No, Judge, thanks.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to call Henry. Come up, please.
Thank you. Mr. Blumberg, you may proceed.
Thank you. And again, Henry, just continue to look straight ahead and I'll be asking you some questions. In what city or town is that in?
That's in Frederick.
And how long have you lived at that address?
For several years. I don't know the exact date, but it's been quite a few years.
Okay. And prior to the removal of your child by the child's mother, who all resided at that address?
It was me, Lexi, and the baby.
And how long had you and Lexi resided together as a couple?
Since she was pregnant.
And can you tell the court when that might have been?
Well, the baby was born in February, so 8-9 months before that time.
Okay. And prior to the two of you moving in, were you involved with her romantically even prior to that situation?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And so the pregnancy that transpired, that's something that was planned, or was it basically an inadvertent pregnancy?
It was not planned.
Okay. Once Lexi became pregnant with your child, were you involved on a daily basis in some capacity taking care of Lexi?
Yes, I was.
And were you both employed at that time?
She had a job for a little while, but it was hard for her to continue working while being pregnant. So I told her that it would be okay for her to leave her job and that I would just figure it out, taking more hours, do what I had to do.
As far as you were concerned, were you and Lexi a committed couple at that time?
Yes, sir, I thought so.
And in fact, you supported her during the period of her pregnancy. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you involved to some extent, taking her to doctor's appointments or assisting in some way?
I tried to do everything I could, but I had to work.
Okay. After the birth, first of all, you were there for the birth of your child, were you not?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And after the birth of your child, were you involved on a daily basis with nurturing and caring for the child?
Yes, I was.
How did you feel about fatherhood at that point, being a young man with the new responsibilities?
I loved it. It gave me a reason to keep doing better with my life.
Let's talk briefly, because I'm sure you're going to be asked about it. You have had some problems with alcohol in the past. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And that resulted in what, 3 drunk driving convictions?
2.
2? And as a result of the second conviction, were you admitted into the sobriety court here in Otsego County?
I've been involved in the court system and probation. Yes.
Okay. And so after the birth of your child, were you still drinking?
For a short time after my child was born, I believe so.
And what caused you to come to grips with your addiction, if that's what you have, and your desire to remain sober?
When the incident happened and I was going through these issues, I immediately sought help before the court even stepped in, because I wanted to be a better father for my daughter. I wanted to be able to be there. I wanted to be a better boyfriend. At the time we were engaged, and I wanted to be a better man for my family. And
so again, were you working then after the birth of your child?
I was.
And when you would get home from work, were you involved in caring for your child?
Every night, yeah.
And when the child would wake up in the middle of the night, would you be involved in attending to the child's needs?
Anytime that I would wake up to it, yes.
And did you and Lexi have some agreement that both of you would address those kinds of things as they came up?
Yes.
Can you tell the court a little bit about your emotional ties and involvement with your child, your connection that you have to your child?
I was very close with my child. There were times that I would get home from work and she would be so excited to see me, and it would make all the hard days worth it. And there were even times where Alexi got upset, because my daughter would choose me for her when she would get all excited when I would get home, and we'd be able to share snacks together and just, I was very close with her. She means a lot to me.
And in regard to your ability to nurture your child, you believe that you have the ability to give the child love and affection and guidance?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now, given the rather tender age of your child, she's probably not been involved in any against religion. Is that your understanding?
That's correct.
Now, we've heard from Mr. Buckingham earlier today that suggested that you would become a more spiritual person. Is that an accurate statement? Can you tell the court a little bit about your involvement with the church and your desire to have your daughter involved as well?
I've become very involved with the church. I recognize that that is a healthy group of people for me to be around. And I just want to be a faithful Christian because that's the life that I believe we're meant to live. And I would love to get my daughter involved with that at an early age in hopes that she wouldn't have to grow up the way that I did or feel the ways that I did. She would just be able to have a happy, healthy life.
Now, are you able, do you believe that you're able to communicate with Lexi about the child in regard to decisions on either on a daily basis or the more important decisions?
I would love to be able to communicate with her on all things. I'm just afraid to reach out to her because I don't know how she would react to it.
Now, we all have heard that at some point in time, Lexi took the child and left your home. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you given any kind of advance notice of that?
No, sir.
How did you discover that your child and the child's mother were gone?
She just got in the car and said that she was going to go to her mom's, and I thought she was just going to go over there and talk to her mom and blow off some steam and come home, and she just never came back.
So when you say she was going to blow off some steam, were there issues that were going on between the two of you?
We had typical arguments about things, but one of the arguments was that I thought she needed to get some mental help because some of the things she would do and say, and she did not like when I would mention those things.
What kind of things did she do and say that caused you concern?
She was just very irritable about certain things, and she'd get very upset about things that I didn't feel were that big of a deal.
Did she believe that your drinking was a continuing issue for you?
No, she knew that I was not drinking, and she was one of my support people at the time.
And so when you discovered that she was gone with your child, were you aware that she had gone to her mother's home?
I thought she went to her mother's home, but it ended up that she was actually at her father's.
And did you, prior to that time, know her father?
I did.
And had you had contact with him in some capacity?
Yes, he's the one that got me into the laborers union, the job that I still, the union I still work for to this day.
And did you have a reasonably good relationship with her father?
Yeah, I thought I did. And even the day that they came to get Lexi's stuff, her father gave me a hug and told me that it was going to be all right. And then he understood the pain because he had lost his family at one time as well.
Now, you heard Mr. Buckingham's testimony about his perception of Lexi's father's drinking problem. Is that something that you have personal knowledge of?
I know that he enjoys drinking after work each day, yes.
And do you have concerns about the welfare of your child if he's placed in the position caring for your daughter?
I don't think that it's a good idea for my daughter to be around that environment.
And do you have any knowledge about what Lexi's doing these days, whether she's there to care for your daughter?
I do not. The only thing that I do know is that every time I've seen Lexi at any type of meeting that we've had to go to, I have not seen my daughter, so I don't know where my daughter is, and I can't get a hold of anybody or talk to anybody to know anything about what's going on.
Now, there is a personal protection order that's been issued out of either Bay County or Saginaw County. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And are you aware of what the allegations were that gave rise to that?
Yeah, there were some pretty bizarre allegations, but the judge did not seem to take them very seriously and put a 6-month PPO in place. And I now am under the understanding that I should have fought that because it most likely would have been dismissed or turned into something more appropriate.
Does that PPO speak to your ability to communicate to her regarding the child?
It says that me and Lexi are allowed peaceable contact about our daughter.
And have you attempted to have peaceable contact with Lexi?
I'm afraid to contact Lexi based on the things that she has done and the allegations she has made, but I have reached out to her brother, and I have had other people such as my foster care workers reach out to her. I've had some of my support team try and reach out to her. I just am afraid to try to talk to her myself because I don't know how she would react to that.
Is that part of the reason why Mr. Buckingham has attempted to reach out on your behalf?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And again, since the removal of the child from your home, How many times have you been allowed to see your daughter?
0 times.
Now, there was an offer, I think, that Mr. Buckingham referenced that would have required you to drive down to West Branch to meet with her for a couple of hours with her grandfather being the supervisor. Was that the offer that you recall?
That was the offer, yes.
And had you given consideration to accepting that so that you could see your daughter?
The only reason I did not is because I'm afraid of Lexi and her family at this point. I don't know what they are capable of. And so I had attempted to, before that offer was even in place, to have my foster care agency that I went through as a child get me supervised visitation, and that offer was ignored.
Now, you've heard, again, I think Lexi's attorney has suggested to the court that supervised parenting time is required for you. First of all, do you have any explanation as to why you understood why it would be needed to be supervised?
No, it has never been an issue in the past, and I cannot see a reason why it would be an issue now.
Other than the potential fear of relapse that you might start drinking. And so this record is clear. How long has it been since you've had a drink?
It's been over a year.
Do you have the requisite parental skills to properly care for your child?
I believe I do, yes.
And so again, when you all were living together as a family, maybe you can tell the court a little bit about living arrangements, how many bedrooms there are and where your daughter would be staying.
There's 3 bedrooms in my home, 2 baths. My daughter has her own room. And when Lexi left, she took everything that I had bought for my daughter. So now I am repurchasing those things as I can and just putting her room back together. I've got her a new bed. She's got a pack and play. She's got lots of toys.
So you're able to provide her with appropriate housing?
Yes, sir, I am.
And have you been able to buy clothes during the time that you were together as a family?
Yes, I did.
And to the extent that there may be medical issues for your daughter, are you in a position to be able to attend to those as well?
Yes, I am.
You are gainfully employed, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And where do you work?
I work right now. I'm working for M&M Excavating, doing a road in Lansing.
Okay. So if the court were to grant your request to give you joint physical custody with parenting time on a week-on, week-off basis, who would be watching your daughter during the times that you're working?
I have several people lined up. I have Jeff Lamson, who is a certified caretaker for children based out of Gaylord. And I also have several members of the church who are willing to help me. And I also have my neighbor, Dave, who's willing to help me. And I have my mother who could also help me.
Your daughter currently is what age?
She's about 1.5 years old.
And during her short lifetime, has she lived the majority of that time in your home?
Yes, she did.
And as far as you can represent to the court, that home provides a satisfactory environment for her?
Yes, the WIC lady actually was at her house several times, and I truly believe if it was not a satisfactory environment that she would have said something.
Now, Henry, do you suffer from any physical disabilities that would somehow limit your ability to parent?
I do not.
Are there, other than the alcohol reliance or addiction, do you have any emotional issues that would compromise your ability to properly parent?
I do not.
One of the factors the court is required to consider is the willingness and the ability of each of the parties to facilitate a relationship between the child and the other parent. Has Lexi done anything since she's moved out of the house and taken your daughter? Has she done anything to facilitate a relationship between you and the child?
Sure.
Has she allowed you to try to FaceTime with the child so you at least could see her if not in person?
No, sir.
Now, again, there was some reference to there will be an explanation as to why Lexi left your house. Was there any domestic violence at any time during your relationship with her?
No, sir. And she told the judge that when we were in court.
Was that the judge down either in Bay County or Saginaw County?
Yes, sir.
So do you have any understanding as to why she would pick up without any advance notice and remove your child from you and move away?
No, sir.
She never gave you any explanation for that?
Her reasoning was just she wasn't happy being with me anymore.
To your knowledge, does your baby have any special medical needs or things along those lines?
No, sir.
And during the time that you were together, was Lexi breastfeeding the child?
No, sir.
Judge, at this point, I have no other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Sullivan, you mentioned the 2 drunk driving convictions. Do you currently have a driver's license?
I'm in the process of getting it back, but no, sir, I do not currently have one.
Okay. Do you know when you would get it back if the process were to be successful?
I do not have an exact date.
When it comes to the distance between the parties, how would you account for the parenting time exchanges without a vehicle?
I have several people in my support group who have already agreed to help me with that until I get my license back.
And how do you get to work every day?
My boss actually picks me up, and when it's not my boss, it's one of my coworkers.
Okay. And so you have testified to sort of some dates, and Mr. Buckingham testified to some dates as well. You mentioned February as the child's birth. That was February of 2022, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Buckingham mentioned getting involved in April of 2023. Does that sound right?
I believe it was a little bit earlier than that.
Okay. So, looking at the timelines of February 22 to Mr. Buckingham's involvement, your daughter was alive during this period before help was administered or sought. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And during your testimony, you referred to the incident. Was that incident, or I guess, what was that?
Which incident?
That's what I'm asking, sir. You mentioned the incident just in general terms, and I just wanted some clarity as to what that was. You said, after the incident, I sought some help, or I decided I need help. So what is the incident, or what you believe to be that triggering event that you referred to?
I went out July 4th, and we were trail riding. I was with a buddy of mine, and I had had a few drinks, and I crashed my truck, and I ended up spending 5 days in jail. And during that time, I was very miserable, and I just wanted to see my daughter. And I just didn't want to live life that way anymore. It was a wake-up call for me.
During your testimony, you testified about communications, and Mr. Blumberg asked you some questions about communications as well, and the uncertainty regarding parameters under which you and Ms. Taylor could communicate. And I understand that there's a PPO as well, I believe out of Bay County. If the two of you were required to communicate using like a third-party app, is that something you would be comfortable with?
Yes, sir.
And when I say a third-party app, without getting into too much detail, it would allow a potential other individual, whether it was an attorney or the friend of the court, to monitor that communication. Is that something to which you would agree?
Yes, sir. I would be very happy with that.
Okay. Both you and Mr. Buckingham suggested that Alice's paternal grandfather, Miss Taylor's father, has issues with alcohol, or you mentioned that he drinks after work, and concern that you would have regarding Alice being around him or him being around you and Alice. And so is that because of this alleged drinking that you would be uncomfortable having a young child around that?
Yes, sir. I grew up in an environment similar to that, and I know where it led me. So I just don't want to see that happen to my daughter.
And so dovetailing from that statement, do you understand? We haven't heard testimony from Miss Taylor yet, but if she were to suggest, concerns over being around drinking, you've mentioned these convictions that you've had in the past. Do you understand why there might be a concern there?
I believe so.
Okay. During your testimony, you also referenced the personal protection order, and you characterized the allegations in a certain way. And so I want to clarify that PPO was granted after a hearing, correct?
Yes.
And so prior to entry of that personal protection order by the judge in Bay County, both you and Ms. Taylor had the opportunity to be heard?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned you're currently working for M&M. I think you mentioned being a laborer or something of that nature. Is that, well, I guess what sort of work schedule do you have in terms of days a week, hours? What does that look like?
Right now I'm working 5 10-hour days.
Okay. Is that a Monday through Friday schedule, or is that okay?
Yes, sir.
And is that consistent hours, the 10 hours?
Typically, yeah. But I guess I won't answer more than the question. Yes, sir.
Fair enough. So, is it, do you know when you have to be up and out of the house every day? I understand it sounds like friends or colleagues or somebody's giving you a ride up to wherever the work site is. So is it a consistent time that you have to leave every day?
Yes, sir.
What is that time?
6:20 a.m.
Okay. And approximately what time are you returning from work every day?
I get off at 5:30 and it takes me about an hour to get home. So about 6:30.
Okay. So if we approximated about 12 hours a day,
Right.
that you're out, does that sound fair?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a salary position or an hourly rate position?
It is an hourly rate.
Okay. What is the hourly rate that you're earning at that position?
Right now, I believe it's $25.12.
Okay. $25.12 an hour?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you receive any bonuses for the work?
No.
Okay. Are there any paid benefits like health insurance under which the minor child could be covered, or you're covered, anything like that?
I know I'm covered, but I'm not entirely sure how any of it really works.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned the WIC individual or somebody from WIC coming to the household. Would the person from WIC interview you and Ms. Taylor, or what were those meetings or visits? What was the purpose of those?
It was just a checkup on Alice and to see how things were going with her and her development.
Okay. And so would you be present for those interviews?
Typically I was at work.
Okay. So is it your understanding then that Ms. Taylor would typically conduct those interviews if she was home?
Correct.
Okay. I have no other questions for Mr. Sullivan, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Blumberg, any additional questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Henry, you had indicated that representatives of apparently the state for these WIC meetings. Did you have an understanding as to why they were there?
Because we had a WIC card to help us out at the time, I believe, is the reasoning behind them coming, because it would help buy formula.
Okay, were both of you in a position financially where that was something that was necessary?
Yes, I believe so. I was struggling.
Was that before you were working at M&M?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Mr. Buckingham had talked about he and Mr. Waldo meeting with you and Lexi. Do you recall his testimony?
Yes.
What was the purpose of those meetings?
They were just general checkups to see how I was feeling, how things were going in and outside of family life, how work was going, just to see where my headspace was at, because typically you can tell when a person's going to relapse or going to do something bad when you get to know them. So they were just trying to get to know me and to be able to catch something that may have happened before it was going to happen.
Did Lexi, was she resistant to these people coming into her home with you and talking about these things?
She wasn't resistant to them coming in and talking with me, but she did not seem to want to participate in it very often.
And again, did you and Lexi have arguments over your sobriety?
We never really argued about that, I don't believe.
And you got the sense she just didn't want to be with you anymore, and that's why she picked up and left?
Yes, sir. For whatever reason, she told me that I made her want to kill herself, and that destroyed me.
So you had also made some comments earlier on about Lexi's mental health and your concerns about that. Has she ever been diagnosed as being bipolar, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
Has she demonstrated behaviors that had caused you concern?
Yes, sir.
And what were those kinds of behaviors?
Just having major mood swings and being upset about things that didn't seem like such a big deal. And some days there'd be things that would set her off, and then other days the same thing wouldn't be a big deal to her.
Did you and she talk about participating in counseling at all?
I tried to talk to her about getting into some type of counseling together, but she had told me that it was too late.
In terms of Lexi's ability to properly parent, do you have concerns that she can properly care for your child?
I have concerns that she doesn't properly take care of herself very well. When she was with me, I believe her to be a good mother.
But now that she's not with you, does that cause you?
It does cause concern for me, yes.
Okay. Do you know anything else about the people that live in that home?
I don't know a lot other than I know they all have their struggles. They fight their battles, as we all do, but some of the battles they fight concern me.
Do you know who resides in the home?
Last I knew, it was Jacob Taylor, Steve Taylor, Lexi, and my daughter.
Okay. Thank you. Judge, I have nothing else.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, anything else?
Just a quick follow-up. We talked about Mr. Buckingham. I don't recall the name of the individual who came with him. And Mr. Buckingham mentioned he's a retired superintendent. Is, to your knowledge, Mr. Sullivan, is he a certified counselor or social worker or anything like that?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And so I understand he received a referral from the drug court. Are you aware of any professional certifications he has to address, substance abuse issues?
No, not that I know of.
And as far as you know, he's not a certified family counselor or trained in that area, as far as you know.
As far as I know.
Okay. Nothing further for Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Just quickly, one follow-up question. Henry, do you believe that you are benefiting from the guidance provided by both Mr. Buckingham and the other gentleman?
Yes, sir. I strongly believe I am.
And do you look at them as a support system for you?
Yes, I do. I lean on them very often.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Blumberg, any additional witnesses?
Yes, Judge. We would call Lexi Taylor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Blumberg, you may begin.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, where do you currently reside?
I reside in Bay County.
What is the address? And who also resides at that address?
My father, Steve Taylor, and my brother, Jacob Taylor, and my daughter.
And how old is your brother?
He's 19.
Okay. Was that the home that you were raised in as a child?
No. Part-time, yes.
Okay. Were your parents divorced?
Yes.
Okay. And you've lived at that address for how long?
Since June 2023.
And prior to moving into that address, where were you residing?
With Henry at the Frederick address.
Okay. And how long did you reside at that address?
For about 2 years.
Okay. After the birth of your daughter, how long did you continue to reside at that address?
Until June 2023.
Okay. And I'm sorry, when did you start residing at that address? I'm trying to determine how long you lived there.
Roughly 2 years before that. I found out I was pregnant maybe June, before that February. So that's when I moved in.
So prior to the birth of your daughter, were you involved in a committed relationship with Henry?
Yes.
Okay. And that was a relationship you were hoping would continue, become a permanent relationship?
Yes, at the time.
Okay. After the birth of your child, would you acknowledge that Henry was very much involved in the raising of your daughter?
He was not.
He was not. Okay. And can you tell me why you made that statement?
I understand his busy work schedule, but whenever he'd be home, he kind of just distanced himself from her. He didn't really seem to want to take care of her. Like, he'd feed her breakfast, but that'd be about it.
Okay. And during that period of time after the birth of your daughter, you were not working?
No, he would not allow me to have a job.
How would he stop you from getting a job?
Threaten me. He would tell me he'd kill my dog or run off with my daughter.
Okay, let's slow down. He said he would kill your dog.
Yes.
He said, I don't want you to work, but if you get a job, I'm going to kill your dog. That's your sworn testimony?
He would make threats while I was at work with the brief time I had a job and say that my dog was misbehaving. He would kill my dog if I didn't take care of him.
So this is while you were at, so when did you work? At night?
No, well, at first I did work night shifts, but then I switched to day shifts and I would only work Saturdays and Sundays.
So let's talk about, and we're talking about a period of time after the birth of your daughter.
Yes, it was roughly around July through 2 or 3 months before I left.
Okay, so your daughter's a month old and you are taking a job at night. I'm assuming that means that Henry would be the one caring for the child. Is that correct?
She was not a month old. This was right before she turned a year.
Okay, so she's between 10 and 11 months old, still an infant, and you're out working at night. Would that necessarily mean that Henry was the one that was caring for your child?
During those hours, yes.
Okay. And what would your shift run from when to when?
I'd usually work about 8 hours.
And the night shift would start at what time?
8 p.m.
Okay. So from 8 at night till 8 a.m. in the morning, you were away working?
It would be till 6 a.m. because I would have to drive Henry to work.
Okay. Still, that's a rather significant length of time that you're gone, and Henry is the one that's looking after his daughter. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And so when did that employment stop?
Shortly, a few months before I left. I'm not quite sure on the dates.
Okay. Well, why did you leave? What was the reason that you took your child and left the county?
Why did I leave Henry?
Yeah. Yes.
He had just become more unsafe, more unstable, was becoming more controlling. I started to realize how bad the relationship was and how abusive he was towards me. I'm ashamed it took me that long, but I did finally realize it, and that's why I left.
Let's talk about the abuse that you allege occurred. Had he ever struck you?
Supposedly not intentionally.
Well, my understanding is that while you were under oath before the circuit judge in Bay County, you told the judge that he never struck you.
Yes, I was still scared of him at that time. I understand that it wasn't intentional on his part, but it was because he was angry and I was in his way.
Well, can you tell me when that might have occurred?
One of the times was he had crashed the truck and he punched me in the stomach while I was trying to move around him to see how deep the truck was in a snowbank. One of the other times he threw a tire across the garage and it hit me in the knee. Another time he threw a chain. One time he threw keys and it shattered a bowl. He has, pinned me down with a gun before. So
I'm sorry. Say that again, please.
He's pinned me down with a gun before.
And these are not things that you told the judge down in Bay County?
No, I didn't want to tell her because I do and am afraid of him.
Well, those are pretty significant allegations. I would think if they were true, you would have told the judge that they were true, but you didn't do that, did you?
I had them all documented and I was prepared to show them to her, but with the instances that I did provide, she did not find it necessary for me to explain further.
And what instances did you provide that judge that resulted in the issuance of a PPL?
I included an instance where he threatened to kill me slowly if I had ever cheated on him. He told me he would make me suffer. The second incident was when he had brought my cat at the time. He had brought her into a room, Alice's room that I was painting before she was born. And he had a knife to her throat and he told me to tell her to say goodbye, basically, because he was going to kill her because she scratched him and he found that disrespectful and he wouldn't tolerate it. Which when I told him not to and I begged him to give me the cat back, he threw her at me and slammed the door, leaving me in the room. The third instance that I documented was the night of his second DUI. He chased me through the house with a gun while I was holding my daughter, and I locked myself into her room and hid behind the dresser as he was pounding on the door until his mother pulled him away.
One of the exhibits that your attorney sent to me for my review was a picture of Henry, I guess, with a gun. Are you familiar with that exhibit?
Yes, I am.
And is that the incident that you just described?
No, that was before that.
So at some point, apparently you said enough was enough. You were just going to pick up and leave without notice? Is that what
Yes.
happened? You didn't think it was appropriate to tell Henry why you were going or where you were going?
I did tell him that I was leaving because it was unhealthy and I did not want to continue anymore. I did not feel safe telling him where I was going because of threats he had made to me and with his past actions.
And so when you left, did you tell him that he could contact you so that he could see how his daughter was doing?
No,
Did you allow him any parenting time between the time that you left and today's hearing?
I offered parenting time, but none of them were successful.
The parenting time, as I understood it, because one of them came through your attorney to me, was that it was going to take place in West Branch at some undisclosed location with your father acting as the supervisor. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes,
And that never happened, correct?
correct.
Other than that one proposed short visit in West Branch, have you done anything to encourage and facilitate a relationship between Henry and his daughter?
I've offered parenting time 4 times.
All of them supervised by your father?
Yes.
Does your father have a drinking problem?
He's a social drinker, but he does not drink at the house or around my child.
You heard Mr. Buckingham's testimony that when he had a conversation with your father was probably intoxicated. Do you doubt that that was an accurate assessment of that conversation?
That is not true. My father was at work.
So Mr. Buckingham made that up?
He assumed incorrectly.
Okay. Can you tell me why you haven't allowed Henry to FaceTime or talk? Obviously, a phone conversation with a child of that age may be difficult, but why you haven't done anything to allow him to FaceTime with his daughter?
I believe since our separation, Alice's behaviors have become healthier and it's just safer for her due to his unstable nature.
So let's talk about these behaviors that you've described. She's not yet 2 years old. What behaviors have you noticed that you're attributing to Henry being the father?
Henry, whenever we would argue, would occasionally hit himself in the head or start striking himself. And unfortunately, our daughter had picked up that habit.
And have you told anybody about this before?
I've spoke to my mother about it a few times.
No, you don't live with your mother, but your mother's involved with Alice as well?
Yes.
You have, based on what you've told me, am I correct in assuming that you don't believe that there's a strong emotional attachment between Henry and his daughter?
I do not.
You don't think the efforts that he's made to see her, to try to get physical custody of her, is an indication of his love and affection towards her?
I do not.
So if you had your way, ma'am, you would not allow him to see the child unless under supervised conditions. Do I understand you correctly?
Correct.
You have concerns about Henry's ability to support his child?
I do.
You heard his testimony today about his employment, his hourly rate of pay, and you have concerns about his ability to support her?
I think that he can financially provide for her. I'm just not sure about anything else.
And what about your employment? Are you employed?
I am employed.
Where do you work?
Sam's Club.
And what is your normal work schedule?
I work about 32 hours a week.
And who watches your daughter in your absence?
My Aunt Sam.
And how old is she?
I'm not sure her age. She's probably around her 40s.
And she comes to your father's house to watch the child?
No, I take her to my Aunt Sam's house.
And who else resides at your aunt's house?
My aunt's boyfriend and her 3 kids and his daughter.
So there are a number of kids staying at that house at the same time, right?
Correct.
And do you know the ages of the other children that Aunt Sam is watching?
I know that 2 of them are in high school and then 1 is 5 years old.
Since your daughter's been exclusively in your care, has she had any medical issues that needed immediate attention?
She has not.
Now, are you suggesting to the court that Henry not have joint legal custody as well?
Yes, I am.
And first of all, do you understand what that entails?
Yes.
What's your understanding of that?
That it is involving him in doctor's appointments and medical decisions.
And why in the world would you believe that the father of the child should not be allowed to participate in those kinds of things?
He's never shown interest. I've actually begged him to come with me to doctor's appointments before. He refuses. He's either locked himself in our bedroom with the WIC agent there, or he just sits in the car.
So your current living arrangement, is that a temporary situation?
Yes, I'm on a few apartment lists.
Okay. And how much are you an hourly employee at Sam's Club?
I am.
How much do you make an hour?
15.
And are you the recipient of state assistance in any way?
I have WIC, but that is it.
Are you going to be able to afford a place of your own at $15 an hour?
I am.
And where exactly are you looking to live? In Bay County?
Yes.
And is that your choice of residence because your family's there?
Yes.
You doubt Henry's level of sobriety these days?
I do.
You've heard him testify under oath that he hasn't had a drop of alcohol in over a year, but yet you find that to be perhaps not truthful?
I believe that he might be sober from alcohol. It's the drug use that I'm concerned.
Okay, so we haven't really talked about that, nor have I heard about that. What is your understanding as to his involvement with controlled substances?
I know that he used to be a heroin addict, and then he cleaned himself up for a while. While we were together, I know he did pills because he had lost one in our living room where our daughter plays, as well as I've walked into him shooting up in the garage.
And when would that have been?
A few months before I left. Not that long before that.
Judge, given the length of time that we have, I would stop my question, but I'd like to reserve some rebuttal time if possible.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Backlund.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to piggyback on Mr. Blumberg's comment. I see we've got about a half an hour left if my clock is correct here. And so I certainly have some follow-up for Ms. Taylor based on Mr. Blumberg's questions. And then, I would call her as my own witness as well. And so I just, in terms of procedure, I wonder if there's anything we can do to speed it up, or if we just want to get through the cross right now, and then Mr. Blumberg would have his rebuttal time as well. Just so perhaps Mr. Blumberg, I can kind of strategize, so to speak, in terms of, what we can get through today. I
think just do your cross at this time. And then, in reality, if we need to go a little bit past the lunch hour, I don't have a problem with that. If it's okay with the attorney's schedules, I can certainly go another half hour or so. Okay. Maybe a little bit more than that, even just to make sure that we get this matter, taken care of.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I'll try and go quick. So, Ms. Taylor, you mentioned your work schedule well after Alice was born, before you left, while you and Mr. Sullivan still lived together. In your testimony was that Alice was about 10 or 11 months old when you were working those weekend shifts. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And with the time period between 8 p.m. and 6 p.m., would Alice be awake when you left for your shift?
I would usually lay her down to bed before I left.
Okay. Approximately what time, if it was consistent, would you put her to bed?
Usually around 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Right before I left.
Okay. Would she be awake at 6 a.m. when you returned home, or whenever it was that you got home when your shift ended?
No, I would have to wake her up.
Okay. And then would you stay up, or when did you sleep?
I would usually take him to work, and then she would sleep for about 3-4 more hours usually. So I'd sleep during that, and then I'd get up, and then I'd sleep the rest during her nap time. And then again, occasionally when Henry got home, I'd sleep for an hour before my shift.
Okay. And there was testimony regarding the FaceTiming and that not being allowed. And Mr. Sullivan referenced being concerned about reaching out to you for contact, or it seems like any reason. So has Mr. Sullivan reached out to you to FaceTime or Skype or Zoom with Alice?
Not since my PPO.
Okay. And do you recall when that PPO was entered by the court?
July 7th.
Of this summer?
2000, yep.
Okay, so July 7th. Okay. And you discussed Aunt Sam a little bit, Samantha Shorkey. And there were 4 children in that household. 2 kids are in high school. And so you take Alice there. So Aunt Sam is babysitting. Is that during the school day? Is it in the evenings? What does that look like?
It's usually during the school day. So.
Okay. So it sounds like there might be 3 kids in the household then, if I'm counting correctly, or are the other kids school age too?
2 of the kids are in school. One of them is in kind of like kindergarten, and then the other one is homeschooled.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So there's 2 or 3 kids in the household at a time, it
Yes.
sounds like. Okay. I have no other follow-ups for Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Mr. Blumberg, any additional questions for Ms. Taylor?
No, Judge, I don't.
All right, thank you. And any other witnesses, Mr. Blumberg?
No, Judge.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Backlund, then did you wish to call Ms. Taylor?
Yes, please, Your Honor.
All right, so Ms. Taylor, you do remain under oath, and Mr. Backlund, you may begin.
And we've been discussing the child that you and Mr. Sullivan have together. Do you have any other children?
I do not.
Okay. And when you lived with the plaintiff, we've talked about that Frederick address. Was that an apartment, condo, house? What was that?
A trailer.
Okay. How many bedrooms were in that trailer?
3.
Okay. And let's see. What type of residence do you now reside in?
Home.
Okay. And you said that's in Bay City?
Yes.
Okay. Can you please describe that for us? The number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, and things like that.
So it is a 3-bedroom upstairs, 2-bathroom. There's a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room. And then there's downstairs, which is split into 2. And there's a bedroom down there, a pantry, and just a cellar.
Okay. And am I correct in recalling that the residents of the house are you, your father, your daughter, and your brother?
Yes, correct.
And does your father work?
Yes, he does.
Okay. And is that a full-time position?
Yes.
Okay. Is your brother working? Is he in school? What's his situation?
He works full-time as well.
Okay. Does each person in that home have their own bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. And that includes your daughter?
Yes, she does.
Okay. So does she sleep in her own room or does she sleep in your room?
She sleeps in her own room.
Okay. Do you have a baby monitor or a security device that you use to monitor her when she's in her room and you're not in there with her?
Yes, I have a baby monitor.
Okay. Do you use that every night? Okay. I understand there's several people in the house. There's 4 people in there. Are you responsible for purchasing groceries for you or anyone else in the home?
Just me and my daughter.
Okay. Do you have like your own fridge space, or do your brother and your father understand whose food is whose, or how does that work?
We just kind of tell each other whose food is whose.
Okay. And where does the child engage in recreational activities at the house?
She plays in the living room, her room, basically any room in the house besides the basement due to just having the stairs there. And she does like to play in the backyard and front yard.
Okay. And Your Honor and Mr. Blumberg, I want to reference what I had submitted to counsel and the court as defendant's exhibit 1. I think the divider might be incorrect, but that divider is not part of the exhibit there. And so I'm going to hand that to Ms. Taylor, what I have marked as the proposed exhibit 1. Ms. Taylor, can you please describe what I've handed to you?
Pictures of the pantry upstairs and the fridge.
Okay. When you say the pantry, the upstairs, and the fridge, where is that? In which home? Or
in my father's home.
Okay. In the father's home where you're residing?
Yes.
Okay. And can you flip to the next page and continue that process and just describe what's in the photographs?
A cabinet in my father's kitchen, as well as my daughter's closet at my father's home.
Okay. And then the next page?
Pictures of my daughter's room and how it's set up.
Okay. And then the next page, which I believe would be page 4.
It's a picture of my father's backyard.
Okay. Can you flip to the last page, which I believe is page 5?
Picture of my father's front yard.
Okay. And is that an accurate depiction of the home where you currently reside?
Yes, it is.
And did you take these photographs?
I did.
And aside from discoloration, do they appear to be accurate to the photos that you took?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd move to enter the 5 pages of photographs as the defendant's Exhibit 1.
Judge, I'd like to be able to voir dire the witness about these exhibits.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I thought we would be screen sharing so I could see these. I want to make sure it's the same ones as I was given.
Am I able to screen share here? Okay. Would you like me to go through the 5 photographs on here again, Mr. Blumberg?
Why don't we just do them one at a time if we could?
Okay, certainly. So, Ms. Taylor, same process with the documents that I handed you. Please describe what we see on the screen.
A picture of the upstairs pantry in my father's home, and then a picture of the fridge in my father's home.
Page 2. Can you describe?
Hold on. Okay. I was going to voir dire on these pictures. Am I allowed to do that, Judge?
Yes, let's do it picture by picture with your voir dire. So let Mr. Blumberg go now.
So, Ms. Taylor, when were these pictures taken?
Shortly after I moved in.
Okay. So your father doesn't keep his alcohol in the refrigerator?
He does not.
Okay. But these pictures were taken when you moved in, which was back in the summer of this year, right?
Correct.
So this is not indicative necessarily of what it looks like today.
It's very close to what it looks like today.
Judge, I'm going to object on as to the admission of this exhibit on the basis that it's not a fair, necessarily representative of the condition of the pantry and refrigerator today.
Well, I will allow it for what that condition was as to when she took it, and then she can then consider her testimony as to what the current state is, but I will certainly allow it for the purpose of what the condition was when she moved in.
Okay, let's move on to the next one if we could.
It is a picture of the pantry in the kitchen, or the cupboard in the kitchen, and then my daughter's closet.
All right, there's no picture of the bed in which your daughter sleeps. Is it a crib?
She sleeps in a toddler bed.
Okay, but that bed is not reflected in this picture, correct?
Correct.
And again, am I correct to assume that these pictures were taken right after you moved in?
Yes.
Okay. And not necessarily the condition in which they are today.
They are very close.
Okay. Does the food that your daughter eat reflected by the pictures in the pantry?
She eats some of those foods.
Okay, same objection, Judge. I appreciate how you're going to rule, so let's move on.
Okay. Yes, I will admit it.
Okay.
It is a picture of my daughter's room and how I have it set up.
And so, Ms. Taylor, there are 2 photos here, so if you could just comment on each photograph, please.
Yeah, no, they're both pictures of my daughter's room.
The photo on the right, is that a toddler bed or is that where a dog sleeps?
It's a toddler bed.
Okay, and that's just a little bit off the floor, is that correct?
It's a floor bed to help prevent her falling out.
Okay, and were these pictures taken when you first moved in?
Yes, it was after I set up her room.
Okay. Well, either she's incredibly neat or you had these pictures taken to reflect the condition that you wanted them to be. Is that a fair statement?
No, I keep her room extremely clean.
Okay, same objection, Judge.
All right, I will allow admission of this picture.
And is there one more exhibit?
One more, 2 more pages.
It is a picture of my father's backyard.
Okay. And this was taken in July?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any fence or anything there to keep your child from, does she walk yet?
Yes, she walks.
Any fencing or anything around the perimeter that would keep her from getting into someone else's property?
There's fences on our neighbors' yards, but I do stay with her when she's outside.
Okay. And again, I'm assuming that's not what it looks like today because of the climate change. Is that correct?
Correct.
So this isn't really an accurate reflection of what the backyard looks like today. Is that right?
It's what it looks like. It's just an older picture.
Okay, same objection, Judge.
Right. So, man, there haven't been any structural changes or anything like that to the residence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I will admit that.
And then this should be the last one. Here we go.
It is a picture of my father's front yard.
Again, this was taken in July of this past summer.
Correct.
The looks like that travel motorhome to the, is that in your father's driveway?
Correct.
Is that his?
It is not. It is my aunt's, and it's actually currently not there anymore.
Okay. So other than that, this picture reflects the way the property looks today?
Correct.
I have no objection.
All right. Thank you. So plaintiff's exhibit 1 is admitted.
And defendants, Your Honor, I think the divider might have said plaintiff.
Sorry, you're right.
Defendants exhibit.
Yes, defendant's exhibit 1, the photos of the custodial environment are admitted.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. And am I free to stop the share here? Ms. Taylor, we just went through photographs of the home and the inside and the outside. Are you paying rent right now to stay in that home?
I do.
How much do you pay?
I pay $350 a month.
Okay. And is that paid to your father?
Yes.
Okay. And that $350, do you pay utilities or any monthly bills for the house on top of that, or is that your all-in rate to stay there?
It's my all-in rate, aside from groceries.
Okay. So groceries and what the rent is what you're paying to stay there?
Correct.
Okay. And during your testimony for Mr. Blumberg, you mentioned being on an apartment wait list for apartments in the Bay City area. Any idea or speculation as to when one of those might be available to you?
Shortly within the next few months.
Okay. And you mentioned Aunt Sam. She's come up a couple of times as taking care of your daughter. Do you pay her any child care costs to take care of her?
I will be. But right now she's helping me out.
Okay. So as of right now, there are no daycare costs or child care costs.
Correct.
For our house. Okay. And is Aunt Sam, is she in the Bay City area as well?
She is.
Okay. Can you describe your education history, please?
I graduated high school and I attended a AMT course through a college course.
Okay. Do you have any certificates, licenses, or diplomas aside from your high school diploma?
I do not.
Okay. You mentioned working at Sam's Club. Where is that Sam's Club located where you're working?
In Saginaw.
And do you have your own vehicle?
No, but I do. I am able to use one.
Okay. And what is that vehicle?
It is an Elantra. It's got 4 doors, so I have room for a car seat.
Okay. And do you keep a car seat in that car?
Yes.
Who's the owner of that vehicle?
My stepfather, Chad Spihalski.
Okay. And are you able to use that vehicle freely, or do you have to give it back to him or make it available to somebody else?
No, I can use it freely.
Okay. And is there any point in time when you're not going to be able to use that vehicle anymore?
When he returns from India.
Okay. Do you have any idea when that will be?
Sometime after December.
Okay. And do you plan to get your own vehicle at that time?
Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned the Bay City is in Saginaw, the Sam's Club is in Saginaw. You're in Bay City. How far is your commute to that Sam's Club?
About 10-15 minutes.
Okay. If you were to move into one of these apartments where you're waitlisted, how far would that be away from your employment?
Maybe 15-20 minutes.
Okay. And what's your job title?
I am in HMS and rotisserie.
Okay. And I believe you mentioned working 32 hours a week. Is that a Monday through Friday schedule or different days of the week?
It jumps.
Okay. So is there a consistent daily basis when you know you will or won't be working?
I do not work Tuesdays and Fridays.
Okay. So Tuesdays and Fridays off and working all other days on a standard week?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the hourly schedule on those days besides Tuesday and Friday that you're working?
I typically work 8-hour shifts.
Okay. And are those the same 8-hour blocks during the day?
I don't understand.
So is it like a 9 to 5, 7 to 3? What sort of schedule?
I currently jump around on the schedule just to kind of fill in.
Okay. You mentioned, I believe, $15 an hour is your current earnings. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is that year-round work?
Yes.
Okay. Do you receive any bonuses?
I do not.
Okay. Are there any work-related benefits like medical insurance?
Yes, I will be receiving those after my 90 days.
Okay, so 90 days, is that like a probationary period?
Yep, just for when I just started.
Okay. When do you expect that 90-day period to end?
Next month.
Next month. So sometime in November?
Correct.
Okay. And with those earnings that you receive, are you able to provide food and clothing for your daughter?
I am.
Okay. Are you able to afford any out-of-pocket medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance?
Yes.
Okay. And during Mr. Sullivan's testimony, he referenced WIC and state assistance. Are you or your child receiving any state assistance at this time?
Just WIC.
Just WIC? And is that both you and your daughter receiving WIC, or just her?
Just my.
Okay. And so she isn't receiving medical insurance through the state then, or is that part of it?
Oh, she does receive Medicaid.
Okay. And is that my child then that
yes.
she's under, as far as you know? Okay. Ms. Taylor, how old are you?
I am 21 years old.
Okay. Can you generally describe your physical health?
I'm in good physical health.
Okay. Do you have any chronic physical ailments?
I do not.
Do you presently have any physical restrictions that would limit you to how many days you're able to spend with your child?
I do not.
Okay. Can you generally describe your mental health?
It has greatly improved since leaving Henry.
Okay. So would you say it's good, bad, okay?
I would say it's good.
Okay. And are you in therapy or counseling or receiving any sort of mental health treatment?
I am going to be attending therapy, as well as I do take a minor antidepressant.
Okay. And do you believe that the antidepressant is effective in curbing any symptoms that you would otherwise have?
I do.
Okay. And have you attended therapy in the past?
I used to, but I've just recently started up again.
Okay. Any mental health limitations that would limit the amount of time you're able to spend with your daughter?
No.
Okay. Can you describe the emotional bonds that you have with your child?
Me and my daughter are extremely close. We do everything together when I'm not at work,
okay.
or have something to attend that she cannot come with me.
Okay. How do you express the emotional bonds that you have with your daughter?
We love to dance together. She loves to do hugs, high fives, fist bumps, kisses. You know, she'll talk to me sometimes, and try to say I love you. We're still working on the language, but she's improved greatly.
Okay. Can you describe your current daily routine with your daughter?
On days I do not work, we usually get up around 8:30, eat breakfast shortly after that. If we have errands to run, we run the errands. If not, we just end up playing and coloring or reading all day. And then we eat lunch around noon. And then she lays down for a nap around 12:31. She gets up around 3 or 4. And then we do basically the same thing we did in the morning. We play, she has snacks and such. And then around 8 or 7:30, she takes a shower or a bath. And then 8, she goes to bed after I read her a book.
Okay. And what was the daily routine like when you and Plaintiff and your daughter all together?
We would all get up around the same time that he got up, and I would drive him to work, get home, stay up with Alice. She would have breakfast, and then I'd feed her lunch. I'd take a nap with her due to having to get up so early, and then I would go pick him up, make dinner, and then, shower or bathe her, 2 to 3 times a week, because she was a little younger at that age, so she wasn't getting into as much.
Okay. And in Mr. Sullivan's testimony, he characterized, that parenting as relatively equal in the shared duties. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do not.
Okay. And why not?
I mostly took care of Alice. So I made sure she got to her appointments. I fed her, bathed her, stayed up with her. She was awake because of his work schedule.
Okay. And you mentioned the days that you're not working, sort of that routine. So are you also waking up with her on the days when you do work?
Yes, the routine's a little different. Like, I usually wake her up depending on what time I work, and then we eat breakfast, and then I take her to Aunt Sam's about a half hour before I work, and then I go pick her up. right after I get out, and then our routine remains the same.
So when you and the plaintiff lived together, how were the meals for Alice prepared? Was that just you? You mentioned picking Mr. Sullivan and work. So who was preparing those meals?
I was the one who made all the meals.
Okay. What are some of your child's favorite foods?
She loves strawberries. She loves banana bread, spaghetti, broccoli, hamburger helper.
Okay. What do you do to try and make sure she's eating healthy?
I try to give her fruits and veggies throughout the day. I kind of rotate it so she doesn't get sick of having the same kind of meals throughout the day.
Okay. Are you responsible for anyone else's meals in the house besides yours and your daughter's?
I do make my father and brother dinner as well.
Okay. What interests do you share with your child?
We love to read and color, and we like to dance. We'll play tag, and she loves to play hide and seek, even though it's just like peekaboo for her age, but she absolutely loves it.
Okay. Do you tell her that you love her?
Yes.
Does she respond in any way?
Yes, she usually tries to give me a hug or a kiss, or she'll try to say it back.
Does she ever misbehave?
Occasionally she throws tantrums, but nothing extreme.
Okay. Do you attempt to curb that misbehavior?
Yes.
How so?
I try to encourage her to just take a breath. I'll let her, try to have her emotions for a minute, kind of talk to her, talk her through it, try to have a healthier outlet for her.
Okay. Would you describe that as discipline?
Yes, that's what I would describe for discipline.
Oh, okay. Do you ever spank?
I do not.
Okay. When you and plaintiff and your daughter were all living together, was that the same methods to curb the child's behavior if it was misbehavior, or was there spankings or anything like that when you lived together?
No, it was the same.
Prior to the separation, did you or the plaintiff regularly attend religious services?
We did not.
Okay. Do you regularly attend religious services now?
I do not, but my daughter does with her babysitter.
Would that be Aunt Sam?
Yes, that would be Aunt Sam.
So if you're working, does she take her?
Yes,
okay.
correct.
Okay. Does your daughter have medical or dental appointments?
She does.
When you and plaintiff resided together, how did you get your daughter to those appointments?
I took her.
You took her. Would the plaintiff also attend those?
No, he did not want to.
Okay. Were you responsible for scheduling those appointments?
Yes.
And is that still true today?
Correct.
Did the plaintiff schedule any of the medical appointments when the two of you were living together?
No, he did not.
Is the child on any medications on a consistent basis?
She is not.
Okay. Do you make sure that she's hygienic?
I do.
Okay. How do you do that?
We shower or bath every other night, or if not every night.
Okay. And is that consistent with when you and plaintiff lived together, or is that different now?
It was a little bit less because of her age.
When you say a little bit less, is that a little bit less bathing?
Yeah, just usually about 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay. Do you believe the plaintiff to be a morally fit person to take care of and nurture the child?
I do not.
Do you believe you are a morally fit person to take care of and nurture the child?
I do.
Do you drink alcohol?
I do not.
Do you use illegal drugs?
I do not.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
I have not.
Have you ever been arrested?
I have not.
Have you ever been in jail?
I have not.
Do you think the minor child is old enough or mature enough to express an opinion regarding parenting time?
I do not.
Do you ever speak negatively about the child's father in front of her?
Never in front of her.
You mentioned in testimony, Mr. Blumberg asked you questions about the catalyst for the separation and the reasons why you left. Did you feel unsafe with plaintiff?
I do.
How did you feel about your daughter's safety in the presence of the plaintiff?
I was always concerned.
Okay. Do you have concerns about your daughter being alone with your father?
I do not.
Okay. Were the police ever called to your residence while you and plaintiff were together for domestic disturbances?
No, I was threatened to not call the police.
To your knowledge, does plaintiff own any firearms?
I know for sure he owns 2.
Okay. Have you ever seen him use the firearms?
I have.
In what way?
He's chased me through the house with one of them and then pinned me down with the other one. And then I've seen him shoot them off like in the backyard and on trails and stuff.
Ever at a person or an animal?
Not to my knowledge.
To your knowledge, has he taken any firearm safety classes?
Not to my knowledge.
And is it your testimony that he's threatened you with those firearms?
Yes.
To your knowledge, did or does the plaintiff have any gang affiliations?
He has claimed to have gang affiliations.
Okay, Your Honor, I want to bring up my screen again if I can. Ms. Taylor, can you describe what's in this photo?
Henry pointing a gun at me.
Okay.
Towards the camera.
So you say toward the camera. Are you behind the camera or taking the photos, or what's going on here?
He came up to me and asked me to take pictures of him holding a gun so he could send them as a threat to somebody. I'm not sure who he sent them to, but he demanded I take the pictures.
Do you recall when this was?
I do not.
Okay. Was it more than a year ago? 2 years ago?
Maybe just more than a year ago,
Okay.
if that.
Was your daughter alive at the time?
I'm not quite sure. I believe so, but I don't want to say for sure.
Okay. And where was this photo taken?
In the garage.
Okay. Were you concerned at all when you took these photos?
Yes, I didn't really want to do it.
Okay. And I guess my question, if Mr. Blumberg would like to voir dire as we go through each photo after I ask questions about it, or if we'd like to go through each one and then ask questions, whatever keeps things moving, I suppose.
I think it'd be good to go photo by photo.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Ms. Taylor, you don't know when this picture was taken. I can't really see the person that's depicted in there. It's your testimony that that's Henry Sullivan?
Yes.
And that's a firearm he has in his hand?
Correct.
Is the thing, do you know whether or not it's loaded?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And your testimony is this picture was taken at his direction?
Yes, he told me to take these pictures.
Are you suggesting to the court that this is an evidence of him threatening you with a firearm?
No, it's evidence that he does threaten people with firearms.
Okay. Well, he'll certainly be able to address that. Judge, I guess, I have concerns about when this picture was taken and what was actually depicted in it. I'm not sure that I can tell that that's even a gun. Can the court make that determination?
Well, it certainly looks like he's holding a gun in his hand, yes.
Okay. Well, for whatever evidentiary value it may have, I guess, other than the fact she doesn't know when it was taken, I have no objection to it.
All right. So, ma'am, you said it was in the garage. I assume you mean the garage of the residence the two of you lived in?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So that photo will be it.
Yeah, and there are a couple of photos, Your Honor, here that would all be essentially part of the same exhibit, like we did for the house. If I could simply go through those, and that would be, defending. Okay, so this is a slightly similar photo of the same questions, Ms. Taylor. It looks like it's in the same location. Can you tell me, is this the same location as far as you know, the same time frame as far as you know?
Judge, it's duplicative. It's the same photo.
I don't believe it is, Your Honor. You can tell by the gestures that are being made by the individual here. He's got a 1 holding up here. He has a 2 holding up here with the pinky. The object in his hand is in a different position.
Yeah, he does. Obviously, it's apparently it appears to be from the same time frame, but there are 2 separate pictures. So
it's exhibit 2 here, if we can go through those in the same fashion.
If she can, again, clarify that this was the same time as the other one and the location. Let's get that testimony on the record.
It was at the same time and in the same location.
And how is this not duplicative?
So I guess, Ms. Sullivan, if it appears there are separate gestures here, to your knowledge, was there any significance to these gestures he's making with his hands?
I just know that he told me they were gang signs. I'm not sure how true that is or anything of the sorts.
And if there's an argument that it's duplicative, we can, if it moves things along, the second photo is similar enough. I believe they depict a similar instance here. I think we can move on.
Are these the same day, same time?
Correct.
It's just a duplicative photo of the same, whatever's being evidenced by it. Why would the court allow multiple pictures of the same thing?
Well, it's not exactly the same thing. It's different hand gestures. It's also got potentially a better view of his face as well as the firearm. So for an objection as to duplicative, I would overrule that.
So then I would move, Your Honor, to enter this photo as well as part of that same exhibit.
All right, so the second photo also would be admitted as part of defendants 3. I'm sorry, defendants. You did not seek to admit number 2, so this would actually be defendants 2.
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor. I understand. Again, we're talking about, is this the same instance as far as you know?
Yes, he just wanted me to move closer to the camera.
Okay. And to your knowledge, is that a firearm in that individual's hand?
Yes.
I understand it looks like that individual is covering their face with their hand. Do you believe that's the plaintiff?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you took this photo as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would move, and I understand Mr. Blumberg, I'm sure, has questions.
No, I have no questions. The court's going to admit it, so we won't object to it.
Okay. So again, I would move to admit this photo as well.
All right. And ma'am, you've not made any alterations to this picture or any of the previous pictures?
No, I have not.
Okay. All right. Then I would admit this photo.
And so again, this photo, this appears to be a different angle, different position individual. Is this the same time and location as far as you know?
Correct. He just moved to a different part of the garage.
Okay. And I know that the individual's face is obscured a bit. Is it your testimony that it's plaintiff in the photo?
Correct.
Okay. And in his right hand, there's an object. You know what that object appears to be?
Gun.
Okay. And in his left hand, I'm scrolling down a little bit here. There are additional objects. You know what those are?
2 bandanas.
Okay. Was there any significance to featuring those bandanas?
It was something about the red, he said.
Okay. Do you know what that means?
I have no idea.
Okay. Same move to admit this as well, Your Honor.
And again, man, this picture's not been altered at all since you've taken it.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Blumberg, any objection?
Judge, I will renew my objection. They're all duplicative. Again, I'm not sure what evidentiary value this has to the court. It's your discretion to allow them in.
Okay. All right, I will admit this one.
And in this same questions, is this the same location as far as you know, Ms. Taylor?
Correct.
And you took this photo?
Correct.
And does it appear to have been altered since you took the photo?
No.
Okay. And it looks like there are some additional objects in here too. Again, is that plaintiff in the photo?
Correct.
Okay. And he still has an object in his right hand. Is that the firearm as far as you know?
Yes.
And I see it looks like the bandanas in his hand and then a hat, correct?
Correct.
Do you know what the significance of the hat was?
It was red.
Okay. And there appears to be a skull on the ground. Do you know what was the significance of that or the purpose of that in the photo?
Objection calls for speculation, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, ma'am. If she's got personal knowledge of it, you can establish that, Mr. Backlund.
You have personal knowledge of the object on the ground there, Ms. Taylor?
Yes, he told me it was to make it look more threatening.
So again, I would move to admit this photograph, Your Honor.
Okay. Any objection as to Mr. Blumberg?
No, Judge.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So this photo is also admitted.
Okay. And I believe there might be one more here, Your Honor, in the same question. Is that plaintiff as far as you know, Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
And you took this photograph?
I did.
Okay. And has it been altered since you took it based on your knowledge?
No.
Okay. And it appears, is that plaintiff's face that we can see in the photograph there?
Yes.
Okay. And the objects appear to be the same in the photograph. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would move to admit this one. And I understand there might be one or two more for the purpose of the time. I think we have enough of these admitted, Your Honor. After this one, like I said, I moved to enter this and then disregard the remaining photographs.
It's the exact same picture as the one before. If this is not
this one is incredibly similar. There's a little bit of a different angle, but I mean, given that it doesn't really show anything different, he appears to be holding the same items. So I will exclude this one.
Okay. And as I mentioned, Your Honor, with the exclusion of this, I wouldn't move to enter any of the further photographs in the potential exhibit.
All right, thank you. So, all right, so those other photos then are admitted as defendant's exhibit 2.
Judge, I'm not sure I just understood what he said. He's moving for the admission of the exhibit that we've not objected to, or that you've already ruled,
right.
Not additional.
Those ones, yes. Correct. There's a couple other photos. He is not seeking to admit those.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop the share there. I asked a similar question to Mr. Sullivan regarding communication between the two of you, utilizing a third-party app or something like that. Would you be comfortable communicating with Mr. Sullivan through a court-ordered application?
Yes.
Okay. And is it your understanding that the personal protection order currently limits your communication with Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, everything except for contact about our daughter.
Okay. Does the PPO in itself limit the mechanisms you utilize to communicate about your daughter?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you currently have a significant other?
I do not.
Okay. To your knowledge, does plaintiff have a significant other?
He does not.
Okay. Does the child have any special needs?
She does not.
What do you do to ensure your child's maintaining good health?
I just make sure she eats her 3 meals a day, has a good amount of water, milk, juice, she's getting good exercise, hanging out with other children around her age and just kind of interacting and playing.
Okay. And during your testimony when Mr. Blumberg was asking questions, he asked, why you decided to live in Bay City, and you referenced family in that area. So can you describe to us what that family unit is that you have in the area beyond the people in your household?
I have Aunt Sam, obviously, and then I have my grandparents as well as my mother and father's close family friends there as well.
Okay. And if Aunt Sam is unavailable to care for your child, with whom do you leave her?
With the close family friends, Michelle Taylor or Shelby Taylor.
Okay. Have you ever had to leave your child overnight with anybody else, like your Aunt Sam or these other Mr. and Miss Taylor?
Just my mother.
Okay. We've heard testimony about where you live in Bay City and where the plaintiff lives in Frederick. To your knowledge, how much time would your daughter need to spend in the car for a full trip between your residence and plaintiff's residence?
Roughly 2 hours.
Okay. To your knowledge, would there be any challenges for transporting your daughter back and forth for those exchanges?
Henry does not have a license.
Okay. And did you hear his testimony regarding other individuals who may be able to assist with the transportation of your daughter or parenting time exchanges?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know those individuals? Recall those individuals that you listed?
I don't know all of the individuals, but I do know Mr. and Mrs. Vargas as well as his mother, but I would prefer his mother not be involved.
And when you say his mother, do you mean plaintiff's mother?
Yep, his biological mother.
Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Vargas, do you know which city they reside in?
Waters, Michigan.
Okay. And that's close to Frederick, correct?
Yep, it's right across the street from his house.
So the Vargases are neighbors?
Yes.
Okay. If there were to be supervised parenting time, Mr. Sullivan expressed hesitation about your father supervising. Would there be any other individuals that you would propose as potential supervisors for that parenting time?
Mr. and Mrs. Vargas, as well as Gary and Mason Buckingham.
Okay. And so you touched on this a little bit. It's the concerns you have regarding parenting time. And so it appears Mr. Sullivan is asking for a week on, week off schedule. Do you have any concerns about extended parenting time or a week on, week off schedule with plaintiff?
Yes, I have concerns of her being around him for long periods of time.
Okay. Why?
He has threatened to run off with her before and make it so I can never see her again.
And so, again, you mentioned this a little bit during your testimony with Mr. Blumberg. So what type of legal custody are you asking the court to recommend?
Full legal custody.
With you or?
With me.
Okay. And what type of physical custody are you asking the court to order?
Full legal custody or physical custody.
Physical custody. And what sort of parenting time schedule would you propose plaintiff be granted with your daughter?
Supervised every other weekend.
Okay, so every other weekend, would that be multiple days of the weekend or one day or an overnight? Can you describe that a little bit for us?
It would depend on who was able to supervise with him. If Mr. and Mrs. Vargas could, I would be fine with overnight as long as someone is there with him to monitor. Okay, so would you be proposing like a Friday to a Saturday or a Saturday to a Sunday every week, or Saturday to a Sunday?
Okay. And you would be comfortable with Mr. and Mrs. Vargas, the neighbors, being supervisors?
Correct.
Have you had any conversations with them about potentially supervising?
I have had conversations with Dave Vargas.
Dave Vargas. Okay. Have you had conversations with anybody else regarding supervised parenting time?
Just my father.
Okay. I have no other questions for Ms. Taylor, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Blumberg, any questions for Ms. Taylor?
Oh, yes, Judge. I have many questions for Ms. Taylor. Ma'am, you're telling this court that you're concerned about Henry having parenting time unsupervised is that in the past he's told you that he was going to take the child and you'd never see her again. Is that your testimony, ma'am?
Correct.
And isn't that exactly what you've done? You have successfully taken this child from the father and have denied him access to the child. Isn't that correct?
For her safety, yes.
Okay, so let's be honest with each other. You've taken this child, denied the father access to the child. You've done nothing to facilitate a relationship between the father and his daughter. Would you admit that or not?
I agree.
Okay, as long as we're being honest with each other. The other thing is, do you talk to your child about the father? Does she even know that she has a father?
I'm sure she knows, but I don't talk to her about him.
So again, another example of you not doing anything to encourage a relationship. If you had your way, you would deny him access to your daughter. Isn't that true?
Correct.
And you've told this court that you are certainly more morally fit than Mr. Sullivan is. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you tell me what makes you the high ground in this case?
I'm stable. I don't fly off the handle. I can control my temper.
The reality is that you're on antidepressants, as Mr. Sullivan testified about your emotional issues. Are you in therapy?
I will be.
Okay. And why do you feel the need to go into therapy?
To deal with everything that happened between me and Henry.
Well, I mean, you've apparently fixed the problem. You've taken the child away from the father and you're denying him access. Are there other issues, depression, that you suggested? You're on antidepressants? What other issues do you have?
I don't have any other issues. And I was only so depressed being with Henry because he did not allow me to go to the doctor.
I'm a bit mystified by these exhibits that you've provided the court today. You've shown us a nice home that you're not going to be living in. You make $15 an hour at a job that provides you 32 hours of work. You haven't quite indicated how much the rent of this apartment that you're looking at is going to be. And yet you're telling this court that you can adequately provide for your daughter. How much is the rent at this apartment?
Around $530.
And you've been working at Sam's Club for how long?
Since August.
And you get paid every week or every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
And how much do you bring home?
Usually around $700.
So you'll have income of about $1,500 at most a month. And you don't know how much the rent's going to be. You don't have a vehicle, but you're going to buy a vehicle. I'm just interested in, what your plan is moving forward. Or are you going to live in your father's house until your child is emancipated?
I'm looking at buying a vehicle. I will be able to afford rent. It is going to be around $500 for the apartment. I can definitely provide a stable environment for my daughter, food and clothing wise, as well as medical and dental.
And is it your continued plan to exclude the child's father from your daughter?
Yes. I would like for her to have a relationship with him, but I just don't trust that he's stable.
Thank you. I have nothing else at this time, Judge.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Backlund?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I want to touch on, some equivalency made by Mr. Blumberg and get some clarity from you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Blumberg mentioned the moral fitness of the parties and then followed that up with your desire to seek mental health treatment. Do you believe that moral fitness is based on someone's mental health?
I do not.
when it comes to the current vehicle that you are driving, are you making any sort of payments on that, or are you able to drive that without payments?
I'm able to drive without payments.
Okay. And is there any family members or anybody else providing financial assistance at this time?
No.
Is Mr. Sullivan providing any financial assistance?
No.
To your knowledge, is he providing any financial assistance to your daughter?
Not to my knowledge.
No other questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Blumberg, any additional questions based on the ones just asked by Mr. Backlund?
No, Judge, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, did you have any other witnesses?
No other witnesses, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Blumberg, did you have any rebuttal?
I do. I would like to recall Henry Sullivan.
Okay. All right, Mr. Blumberg, you may proceed.
Henry, you've heard the testimony of Lexi Taylor, did you not?
I did.
Has there ever been an occasion in which you've taken a firearm and threatened to shoot her?
I did not.
We've seen these pictures of you, those were in the pictures, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What were those pictures about? Why were they taken?
They were just ignorant pictures. There was no real symbolization or meaning behind any of them. It was just being a dumb, younger version of myself.
Lexi testified that you didn't want her to work. In fact, you threatened to kill her cat if she went to work. Did you ever make such a threat?
I did not, and I believe that if that was the case, I don't understand how she did work and nothing ever came out of it. So,
I think the court is at least moderately concerned about the truthfulness of her testimony. Did you abuse her in any way?
I don't believe I did, no.
Did you ever take a gun and threaten her with it?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever, as she said, perhaps inadvertently punch her in the stomach?
No, sir, I do not recall that ever occurring.
You were down in Bay County for the personal protection order hearing, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You recall what her allegations were?
Her allegations were, I believe, of me saying that I was going to harm her dog, and me threatening her with a gun. And I cannot recall any of the other ones.
Did you testify about whether or not those things happened?
I did. I told the judge that I did not do those things, and I did not recall the things that she was saying that I had done.
Did she present the court there in Bay County with the pictures of you holding the gun?
She did not.
Do you know when those pictures were taken? Apparently she did not.
I don't remember when they were taken. It's been so long now. I can't recall a time frame.
Lexi has indicated to the court that she has serious concerns about you being able to properly care for your daughter. Would you address that with the court? Can you properly care for your child?
I believe I can, yes. And I'm also willing to take whatever courses or actions I need to prove that I can.
And do you believe that supervised parenting time is required for you to see your child?
I do not believe that to be the case, especially when she has openly admitted that I have taken care of my child in the past, with it being just me and my child.
Can you confirm for the court that in the event that parenting time is put in place, whether it be on a week-on-week basis or on any other basis, that you would have adequate transportation to be able to carry out the parenting time?
Yes, sir, I would.
Is there any reason that Taylor should not be communicate with you in regards to decisions affecting your child?
I do not believe so. I believe it takes both parents to make that decision.
And have you done anything in the past that would make it so that you couldn't adequately communicate with her?
No, sir, I do not believe so.
Do you believe she's genuinely afraid of you, or is that just some facade that she's presenting to the court?
I believe that's a facade. I believe if she was genuinely afraid of me, things would have gone much differently.
And again, are you asking the court to provide you both joint legal and joint physical custody of your daughter?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have nothing else, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
Sorry.
That's okay. You mentioned the photos being dumb. Was it you in those photos?
It was, yes.
And were you holding a gun?
It was, yes.
Were you pointing it toward the camera?
In that general direction.
Okay. In the first couple photos?
I would say in that general direction, yeah.
Okay. Why were you pointing a gun toward the camera?
I couldn't really tell you. It was just a young, dumb version of me. I made a irresponsible, immature choice for whatever reason. I couldn't really tell you. I don't know what was going through my head that made that feel like a smart decision. But Miss Taylor didn't try to divert this situation, almost felt like it was more encouraged. Not saying that she did anything wrong. I'm just saying that it was a dumb decision that I don't really have a good answer for.
Was the gun loaded? It
was not.
Okay. What was the significance of the other objects in the photographs? The bandanas and the skull on the ground?
There truly wasn't a real significance behind any of it. If I'm being honest with you, I carry a bandana every day as a snot rag. The hat was just a hat that I was given by a friend. There was no significance behind any of it. You can certainly tell that there's multiple colors. Like it wasn't a color thing. It wasn't a gang affiliation thing. I've never been in a gang. I never will be.
Do you recall whether your daughter was alive when you took those photos? When those photos were taken?
I don't believe her to be, but I could not tell you that for certain.
Okay. So you don't recall when those were taken, and you mentioned you didn't recall hitting Miss Taylor, but you didn't say that you didn't hit her. So is it your testimony that you don't recall hitting her, or that you didn't hit her?
I don't recall it ever happening. I want to say I didn't do it. I don't believe I did it, but I truly do not believe that I ever accidentally hit her as she claims. No.
And if we're talking about some time ago, you previously testified to alcohol issues. Would alcohol be a factor in why you might not remember these things?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Would drugs be a reason why you might not be remembering these incidences?
No, sir.
Okay. You just testified with Mr. Blumberg about adequate transportation for exchanges. Do you have a plan in place if you were to be caring for your daughter and there was an emergency that required her to have immediate medical attention?
Yes, sir. I have several neighbors who are all willing to give me immediate transportation.
What would you do if those neighbors weren't available?
In the bizarre case that I was not able to get to, there's several, more than 3. I would call 911 and have an emergency responder come.
And in your testimony just now with Mr. Blumberg, you mentioned that you think Ms. Taylor's putting on a facade and her behavior isn't indicative of somebody who is actually in fear of their own safety. In the testimony was your first part of your testimony was that she left without indicating where she was going. Do you think somebody who is in fear of their safety or their child's safety would tell individuals where they're going in that scenario?
No, I suppose they would not know.
Okay. I have no other questions for Mr. Sullivan, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Blumberg, anything additional?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Blumberg, any additional rebuttal witnesses?
No, Judge, we do not.
All right, thank you. Well, we can proceed to closing then. Mr. Blumberg.
Your Honor, we are presented with a situation where the mother of this young child has decided unilaterally that she's going to be a single parent, excluding the father from the child. I, in 40 years of practice, have never seen a situation where there's been more of an attempt to not encourage and facilitate a relationship between the child and the other parent. Certainly, if the court is to believe the testimony of the defendant that she is living in fear of my client, I don't believe that to be the case at all. My client was as involved as the defendant mother was with this child in the first months of the child's life. It was only upon the removal of the child without notice, without any ability of my client to continue to parent the child, was she able to at least arguably create an established custodial environment. There's been no previous orders entered by this court. My client is desirous of wanting and is entitled to have joint physical and joint legal custody of this child. The child is not yet school aged, so this week on, week off parenting time as being requested is reasonable. Obviously, as the child becomes school aged, that would need to be revisited at a time. But other than the mother's desire to exclude my client from the child's life, he has been loving and nurturing father. He is desperately maintain a relationship with this child, but the defendant has done everything in her power to make that not happen. My client has had issues in his past. The child, he was in a very difficult environment, but he's raised himself from that. He has turned his life around with the help of people like Mr. Waldo and Mr. Buckingham. He has a significant support system. He is a spiritual man, he is a sober man, and he has a right to have a relationship with his daughter. And Alice has a legal right to a relationship with her father. And I hope the court gives serious consideration to the desire of the defendant to exclude him from that, because to me, that is a compelling factor that the court has to consider. I think my client certainly is equal on most of the factors that the court has to consider in terms of a placement for custody. But the thing that is most overwhelming to me is her continued desire to exclude him. And so that we are asking the court to enter the recommended order of joint physical and joint legal custody with parenting time on a week-on, week-off basis until the child becomes school-aged. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Backlund?
Thank you, Your Honor. The testimony provided by the parties indicated they lived with the child together, and Ms. Taylor continues to reside with the child and exercise that custodial environment with the child. She tends to her daily needs. She's part of the child's daily routine. The child and the mother express bonds between each other. Defendant is working. She's able to provide food, shelter, clothing, remedial care, and other necessary care. She schedules the appointments. She takes the child to the appointments. Yes, she removed herself and the child from the residence with plaintiff. And based on her testimony, she did that out of fear of her safety and the safety of her child. There were multiple statements made by both parties regarding the PPO and the PPO proceedings. Taylor filed a personal protection order, which was granted after a hearing. Mr. Sullivan said in his own testimony that the judge didn't need to hear additional information beyond what Ms. Taylor had suggested, which would suggest that the judge agreed that a personal protection order needed to be in place. Granted, that personal protection order does allow for communication between the parties, which I believe they both testified would be appropriate through a third-party app. We didn't reference App Close or Our Family Wizard by name, but I know that those are two common choices for something like that. If Ms. Taylor left the home pursuant to her testimony and didn't inform Mr. Sullivan where she was going, that's indicative of somebody who feared for her safety and the safety of the child. There was suggestion that Ms. Taylor's father was an alcoholic or had problems with alcohol, and in Mr. Taylor's testimony and the testimony of his witnesses, they discussed previous problems with alcohol that he had and the 2 DUIs. And so I think the general consensus between all those involved is that the child shouldn't be put in situations that would otherwise be harmful or where substance abuse may be involved. Ms. Taylor testified that her father is a social drinker, but he's not an alcoholic and he's not a harm to the child. She continues to reside with him. And there wasn't testimony or evidence to suggest that that's not a safe environment for the child. And so Ms. Taylor would ask the court that she have sole legal and sole physical custody with supervised parenting time by any of the named individuals or perhaps individuals that the parties could otherwise agree on. And communication between the parties to also be facilitated through an app such as App Close or Our Family Wizard that would allow a third party to monitor that communication as necessary. I believe those apps would also allow, posting of appointments or calendar events and things of that nature. So that's all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to just take a few minutes to go through my notes and the factors. I'll be back on in about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
A few moments later.
In the Sullivan versus Taylor matter. In this matter, it is a new complaint regarding custody. There are no prior orders. No prior orders in this matter, so there are no proper cause or change of circumstances to consider. The court does have to consider whether or not an established custodial environment exists with either one parent, both parent, or neither parent. Is the court's finding that there is an established custodial environment with the mother in this matter. In looking at the best interest factors, the first factor, the love, affection, and emotional ties that exist between the parties involved and the child, I would find that both of these parties have formed that bond and have love and affection with the child in this matter, and we find this factor is equal. The next factor is the capacity and disposition of the parties involved to give the child love, affection, and guidance, and to continue the education and raising of the child in his or her religion or creed, if any. Again, I find that both parties have the ability and have shown that they can give the child love, affection, and guidance. I would find that this factor is equal. Next factor is the capacity and disposition of the parties involved to provide the child with food, clothing, and medical care. I would find that both parties in this case have that ability. They both are employed. They both have been able to provide for the child when they were together. Mom has been able to provide for the child since they've been apart. I don't think the child would go with either parent. It's not an issue of necessarily who makes more or not. It is, do the parties have that capacity and disposition to provide these needs? And I would find this factor is equal because I think they both can provide these needs to the minor child. Next factor is the length of time the child has lived in a stable, satisfactory environment and the desirability of maintaining continuity. The child is only 18 months. The parties, 18 months old, the parties lived together for a little over the first year of the child's life. Then mom left the residence. The testimony shows that mom left without a prior discussion with dad. She testified she left due to fear in that environment and wanting a fresh start. Dad refutes those allegations. The record does show that shortly after moving out, mom did obtain a PPO, which shows some credence perhaps to her reasoning for leaving the residence. She's been in a new residence now for a short period of time while dad remains at the residence the child was born in and the parties resided in. However, given the fact that the parties had to separate and go different ways, I don't think that can be a negative impact on mom finding new housing. So I do find this factor is equal. Next factor is the permanence as a family unit of the existing or proposed custodial home or homes. Dad has been in his residence for a few years. It appears there's no plan to leave. Mom has moved to a new area where family is present. She's currently living with her father, is seeking her own apartment, though in the same area where she would continue to have other family support. So mom's future is a little less known as far as what the actual residence will be. However, as she's indicated, she is seeking an apartment in that same area and will remain at her dad's until that is available. There's nothing on this record to show that her dad's residence is inadequate or unsafe for the child. So I find this factor is equal. The next factor is the moral fitness of the parties involved. Obviously, there's been testimony regarding dad's substance abuse issues, in particular the recent convictions for operating while intoxicated. He is on probation. The court has even sought to have some other individuals step in to help him with his recovery and decision-making in life, and it's certainly admirable to hear he's doing well now. But obviously, any substance abuse issues are typically a long-term problem to deal with and manage, and it does sound like he is on the right track, so that is very positive. Mom had testified regarding dad's use of other substances. She testified also regarding a use of heroin this year, as well as concern with pills. I think dad is on the right track in life at this moment, but given the history and the amount of time that has elapsed, I would find this factor does slightly favor the mother. The next factor is the mental and physical health of the parties involved. It does not appear that the parties have any physical health issues. There were certainly some challenges regarding the mental health of each party, but the court does not have a record that shows any specific diagnosis for either party to indicate they have a mental health issue that would impact their ability to parent. So I find that factor is equal. The next factor is the home, school, and community record of the child. Given the young age of the child, this factor is not applicable. Next is the reasonable preference of the child. Again, given the age of the child, that factor does not apply. Next is the willingness and ability of each of the parties to facilitate and encourage a close and continuing parent-child relationship between the child and the other parent. Obviously, mom in this matter left the residence. She testified as to why she left and her concerns. It does not appear there were very sincere efforts to make some visits happen, and there were certainly a lot of stipulations on what those visits would look like. That alone would always tip the scale, but mom's testimony is that she would rather not have dad in the child's life at all, and that's what she would suggest is appropriate, which certainly gives the court concern regarding her ability to encourage that relationship between dad and the minor child. Therefore, this factor favors the dad. Next factor is domestic violence, regardless of whether the violence was directed against or witnessed by the child. Mom has made some claims of threats and actual abuse. Dad refutes those. The evidence does show that mom was able to obtain a PPO in another county when she left the residence. So given the testimony and the totality of the circumstances, I would find this factor favors the mother. When considering the best interest factors, first, as to legal custody, mom has expressed her concerns in getting along with dad and communicating with dad, but this is a young couple with a young child. I don't believe there's enough on this record to show that they cannot communicate to make those decisions, or that it would be an excessive burden for that communication to exist. So it is my recommendation that the parties share joint legal custody. It is my recommendation that mom have the primary physical custody. However, based on the best interest factors and what I found was an existing established custodial environment, it is my recommendation that dad's parenting time be consistent with the 46th Circuit long distance parenting time schedule for parents that live 2 to 5 hours apart. So I would adopt that schedule. We will include a copy of that with the paperwork so the parties can become familiar with it. The child in this case is preschool age, so that'll be the section that applies at first. That section indicates that the co-parent would have 7 consecutive overnights per month. It also outlines the holiday schedule and then how the schedule would change once the child is of school age. So I would recommend the parties follow that with a couple small changes. The standard schedule indicates that the exchanges, the receiving parent should do all the transportation for exchanges. However, in this matter, there is a PPO in place that prohibits dad from going to mom's residence. They're allowed to speak regarding the child, but there is that PPO provision that you cannot go to her residence. So him picking up the child from her residence is not feasible. So it's my recommendation that the parties meet in West Branch for the exchanges. In particular, I would just recommend a place right off the exit, which would be the Taco Bell Kentucky Fried Chicken establishment right off the exit, to meet in that parking lot for exchanges. The guideline also indicates that there should be 60 days in advance notice of what week the party will be exercising. Obviously, there would not be an opportunity to provide 60-day notice for the upcoming months. So initially, I'm going to make a recommendation that for November, dad's week would be November 10th to November 17th. And again, the guideline indicates exchanges are on Friday at 5. That is a date that is outside of the objection period. So if there is no objection, then that's when it would start. Obviously, if there is an objection, then that would not begin. For December, the guideline indicates that in odd years, that the co-parent is afforded the Christmas holidays. That includes Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, unless the parties can make some other arrangements. So my recommendation is that dad's December week would be December 22nd to December 29th, again, a Friday to Friday. And that would incorporate the holiday schedule in the standard guideline that dad gets the Christmas holidays this year and mom would get them next year. The parties certainly are free, if they are able to make some sort of other accommodation during that time frame, or if they agree to some other arrangement for his December week, they can do so. I would also recommend that the parties use a third-party app to have their communication. I would recommend the use of app Close. I think that one's does not come with an expense. However, the parties are free to choose whatever app they both agree upon. I would also recommend that a child support recommendation be prepared based on the court's recommended order. Mr. Blumberg, do you have any questions regarding the schedule of the court's recommended?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Mr. Backlund, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, just a clarification question, I suppose, Your Honor. So I understand the communication to be used with AppClose. We're talking about winter months coming up. For those exchanges, I suppose, assuming that everything sticks and the exchanges are taking place, would it be acceptable for the parties, assuming they agree, to phone call if somebody's going to be late or they're stuck in traffic or there's something emergent that requires, maybe not checking an app right away? Would that be okay?
I don't see a problem with that. I think certainly when the winter hits, you might have some difficult travels during that time frame. So yes, I would think that would be appropriate, that if during an exchange the parties need some type of immediate contact, a phone call would be appropriate.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to the parties and the attorneys for appearing. That does conclude this matter.
Thank you.